Well, welcome to Tuesday Night Bible Study. I am your host, Jordan Long. We're going to pick up on something that we've been talking about over the past few months. Kind of took a break from it over the Thanksgiving season and all that, but we were in the middle of talking about the churches of Revelation. And we have two more churches to talk about. And so let's turn over to Revelation chapter 3 to start. It's amazing as you start looking through the churches and see correlations between the church, early church, and the church now. You know, we really are part of the same church. And if we can learn from the things that Yeshua told those early churches, that we can put into place in today's church, we can avoid some of the same mistakes that some of them made. But today we're going to be picking up kind of as a recap. Last time we were talking about the church of Sardis, and they were the ones who pretty much were the dead church. Like they had nothing that was alive in them. They were the ones who were told that they better awaken or else their lampstand would be removed. But the church that we're going to focus on tonight is quite different. It's one of the only two churches that was told nothing of correction from the Lord Yeshua. And it is the church at Philadelphia, not Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, but the ancient city of Philadelphia. So Revelation chapter 3, starting at verse 7. And to the angel of the assembly in Philadelphia write, "These are the words of the Holy One, the true One, he who has the key of David, who opens and no one shall shut, who shuts and no one shall open. I know your record of works and what you are doing. See, I have set before you a door wide open which no one is able to shut. I know that you have but little power, and yet you have kept my word and guarded my message and have not renounced or denied my name. Take note, I will make those of the synagogue of Satan who say they are Jews and are not but lie. Behold, I will make them come and bow down before your feet and learn and acknowledge that I have loved you. Because you have guarded and kept my word of patient endurance, have held fast the lesson of my patience, with the expectant endurance that I give you, I also will keep you safe from the hour of trial, testing, which will come upon the whole world and try those who dwell upon the earth. I am coming quickly. Hold fast what you have, so no one may rob you and deprive you of your crown. He who overcomes is victorious. I will make him a pillar in the sanctuary of my God. He shall never be put out of it or go out of it. And I will write on him the name of my God and the name of the city of my God, the new Jerusalem, which descends from my God out of heaven, and my own new name. He who can hear, let him listen to and heed what the Spirit says to the assembly, the churches." And so it's amazing because there's not a word of correction in this whole passage to the church at Philadelphia. He's pretty much commending them for what they're doing. Before we start to break down exactly what his message is to this church, I want to kind of give a little bit of historical background on the city of Philadelphia. Everybody knows the American city of Philadelphia. It was named after this ancient city. And its name means the city of brotherly love, which is interesting because it was named by King Attalus of Pergamum, whose nickname was Philadelphus, which means lover of a brother. So he was noted for his admiration and love he had for his brother Eumenes, and he named this city in honor of him. So he loved his brother so much, he named the city of brotherly love. One feature about the city let me back up. One feature of the city of Philadelphia was that it was destroyed by an earthquake in 17 AD, along with Sardis and other cities in the locality. We talked about the earthquakes that had swept through the region. But it's located 28 miles southeast of Sardis. So when the earthquake hit Sardis and pretty much wiped out that city, it also decimated Philadelphia. Most of the others recovered rather quickly from the disaster, but the aftershocks continued in Philadelphia for quite a number of years. So they didn't just have aftershocks for days or even months afterwards. They were having aftershocks from the earthquake for years. which led that people had to flee the city repeatedly. So they had to keep leaving the city because they were afraid that the stones were going to fall on them. So they kept going out into the surrounding villages and into the countryside. Tiberius Caesar helped Philadelphia recover from the earthquake, and out of gratitude, the city changed its name to Neo Caesarea, which means New Caesar, and for a while it bore that name. The church in Philadelphia is unique because it's a church that delights Yeshua. It's a church that actually brings him pleasure. When you look at this church, a few of the things that he says that they had little power. They weren't a big church. They weren't even a very noteworthy church. It's not like the church of Ephesus that had many noteworthy leaders in it. It didn't have the Apostle John or Timothy. They were not under the kind of stress and strain that the people in Ephesus experienced. So they were not a very noteworthy church. But he said that even though they had little power, they had kept his word and they guarded the message. So it doesn't matter how big or small a church is. It matters whether they're faithful. So basically he's telling them that this is a faithful church. This church has remained steadfast. They've remained faithful to him. To this church, or a church like this church, Yeshua says he's going to open doors that no one can shut. So I wanted to kind of talk a little bit about doors. We know we've talked about doors here. We talked about portals, the importance of it. But just starting as like a definition, kind of picking up on what Sherry does with the definitions here, but a definition of a door, I think we know what a door is, but the definition of a door is a movable barrier used to open and close the entrance to a building, closet, room, or vehicle. You need a door to go into a place, and you need a door to come out of a place. It makes sense. If there was no doors, you'd be pretty much trapped in one place. Doors help us get in and out of a room, car, bus, train, airplane. When there's no door, a person could be confined or locked up in a particular place. Being confined or tied down to a particular place speaks of stagnation. Think of it. If there's a cistern that's holding water and there's no inlet, there's no outlet, that water will stagnate. It just sits there and it becomes a breeding ground for bacteria and all kinds of stuff, and it's no longer fresh. But if there's doors, if there's a channel that comes in, there's a channel that comes out, it creates an atmosphere of freshness. It keeps things fresh and alive. We all desire growth and progress in every area of our lives. Without open doors, a person can be confined to a particular level or spot. Open doors enhance movement. So you can think, I've reached this level, but if there's no open door before you, then you're plateaued. You're forced to stay at that level. And notice, too, he doesn't say, I've put a window open before you. We'll see this a little bit later, but you see when Yeshua's talking about how he's the doorway for the sheep. And John, actually, let's turn over to that. Let's turn over to John chapter, I believe it's John chapter 14, but let me see. No, it's not John chapter 14. Anybody know where that is? Okay, John chapter 10. Found it. John chapter 10, starting at verse 1. I assure you, most solemnly I tell you, he who does not enter by the door into the sheepfold, but climbs up by some other way elsewhere from some other quarter, is a thief and a robber. But he who enters by the door is the shepherd of the sheep. The watchman opens the door for this man, and the sheep listen to his voice and heed it. And he calls his own sheep by name and brings them, leads them out. When he has brought his own sheep outside, he walks on before them, and the sheep follow him because they know his voice. They will never follow a stranger, but will run away from him because they do not recognize the voice of strangers or recognize their call. Yeshua used this parable with them, but they did not understand what he was talking about. So Yeshua said again, I assure you, most solemnly I tell you, that I myself am the door for the sheep. All others who came as such before me are thieves and robbers, but the true sheep did not listen to and obey them. I am the door. Anyone who enters in through me will be saved. He will live. He will come in and he will go out freely and will find pasture. So he's using this illustration of a door to refer to himself. So it must be a pretty important thing to him. So when he's using this illustration, he specifically says that those who come through another way, say through a window or some crack in the wall, they're thieves, they're robbers. They're not coming with good intention. So he's not going to set an open window before you, which no man can shut. He sets an open door before you, which no man can shut. A door is a natural passageway. If you have to crawl in through a window, either you got locked out or you're not supposed to be in there in the first place. But he says to this church in Philadelphia that he opens a door which no one can shut, and he shuts a door which no one can open. There are certain doors in your life that should be open, and there's certain doors in your life that should be shut. There's certain doors that are never meant to be opened. There's certain doors that should have a padlock on them that you throw the key away and never go in there. But he's here to open the doors that need to be opened and to shut the doors that need to be shut so that you can be fulfilled in life. That's his purpose for you. But in order to get into a place, in order to open a door, a lot of times most doors have keys. You need a key to be able to open the door. In Matthew 16, verse 19, God says he's given us the keys to the kingdom of heaven. He didn't say one key in particular, but he said multiple keys. There's different keys that open different doors. You can say that even in this building. There's different keys that open different doors in this building. You can't have one key and say, this is going to open all the doors in the world. Well, it doesn't work that way. You have to have a specific key. So you need to find out what the keys are that Yahweh has given you personally to open the doors in your life that you're supposed to have opened. What are the keys that are needed to open the doors of favor, to open the doors of victory, to open the doors of health, to open the doors of shalom in your life? What are the keys that you need to find? And it's like a treasure hunt. You need to hunt out those keys so that those doors can be opened. You ever see those, they're quite popular actually now, those escape rooms. And the entire purpose of this escape room is you have to solve a puzzle, and usually it's not just one person. You have to work together to figure out this puzzle, solve this mystery, to be able to find another clue that leads you to another place. And you're timed, by the way. You have a timer that's running, and you have to find all the clues that will lead you to this locked case where you can find the key that will open the door to the next room so you can escape that room. So I did that one time. It's actually kind of fun, and it's a good team building activity, because it's like there's some places in your life, some doors in your life that you cannot open yourself. There's some doors in your life that somebody else has the key to, and you need to be able to get the key from them to access that place. There's some places where you know, mom is a good example of that in our lives. She has keys that she gives to us. She has these, we might call it revelations. She has these bits of revelation that she gives to us that are meant to unlock doors that set us free in our life, that open new realms to us, that help us to step into the new places that Yahweh has for us to walk in. But just in the Bible, you look across through the Bible, doors are mentioned countless times. You see in Psalms it talks about lift up your heads, O you gates, be lifted up, you ancient doors, that the King of glory may come in. And so what is it that is the significance of doors in the Bible? Why is it that he focuses so much on doors? And what are certain keys that the Bible mentions that opens these doors in our lives? So the first one is praise. Praise opened the prison doors for Paul and Silas. You think of it. When they were there in Acts chapter 16, they are in a place that they needed to get out of. They were in a bad place in their life. They were in a prison. They're locked in this cell. But rather than saying, oh God, why are we in this place? Oh God, you need to get us out of this place. Oh God, oh God, oh God. They start praising because they knew the power of praise to silence the enemy. They start praising God, and what happens? The prison doors miraculously open. They open before them. And all the attention ends up focused on Yahweh. Because now you know they didn't do that in and of themselves. They didn't have the key to open that door. Their praise opened up the door, and it was powerful. There's another instance where prayer opens doors. And we talk about prayer declarations. That opens the doors. In Acts chapter 12, Peter finds himself in prison, much like Paul and Silas. He finds himself in a place he didn't want to be in. And he needed an open door to be able to get out of that prison. So what happens? People start praying for him. They start declaring and decreeing over him. And he ends up having this miraculous situation that happens, and the angel comes and leads him out. The door swings open on its own accord. Of course, then he shows up at the house, and they don't let him in because they're so surprised that he's standing there. But prayer, never underestimate the power of one person declaring over another. That really is what intercession is all about. It's about speaking over another person things that will open the doors that the enemy has put around them to restrict them, to hold them captive in a particular place. In Luke chapter 11, we have a story that Yeshua is talking about where a door is locked and a friend needs something. Remember that whole thing? And the friend comes and knocks on the door, and the guy's like, no, it's nighttime, I'm asleep, we're all asleep, I'm not coming up. But because he's so persistent at knocking at that door, he actually finally gets up and gives him what he asks. And it's talking about the persistence. And there's some doors, it's a lot of times people look at open doors as a sign that, well, that door is open, so it must be from God, and that means I'm supposed to go through there. But how many times in the Bible do we see that there were doors that were shut tight and sealed, and you're supposed to go through that? And how many times did we see that, oh, well, it all seemed favorable that this should be the decision that we're going to make, but then it ends up being that that's not the way Yahweh wanted them to go. So you can't just take a clear-cut, that's an open door before me, I'm supposed to go through it, as a sign that, yeah, that's Yahweh's leading. And you can't take, well, the door slammed shut in front of you as the sign that he doesn't want you to go there. You have to have discernment to know which doors you're supposed to go through, which ones you're not supposed to. Matthew 7:7 says, ask and it will be given to you, seek and you will find, knock and the door will be open to you. If you don't knock on the door, somebody doesn't know that you're out there. I remember when I was little, when Mary Fran had come to visit here, went up to get her out of her hotel room, and I went up to the door and I kind of just knocked very lightly. I very timidly knocked at the door, and she didn't come to the door. So I stood there. I just stood there outside the room, and I kind of knocked a little bit again, and then I got a little bit louder, and she came to the door, and she's like, you need to knock louder. I can't hear you. I didn't know you were out there. So how are we knocking at the doors in our life? How persistent are we? How much do we want what's inside that door? If we know that we know that we know that inside that door is something that Yahweh has for us, say that's a room that has the healing that you are believing for, or that has the prosperity that you're believing for, or that room has the peace that you're believing for in your life. How much do you want what's inside of there that you're going to be persistent at knocking on that door? I'm talking about not physically knocking at that door, but through your persistence in declaring and decreeing, through your persistence in praising Yahweh for the victory. How persistent are you going to be to go through that door? I said this before, but in Psalm 24, we're told of the ancient gates. When we talk about ancient past, but ancient gates. They're doors that have been closed for a long while that need to be opened. There are some ancient gates that are one day going to be very much open. It's the Eastern Gate. It's kind of funny when you look at the whole situation surrounding the Eastern Gate. Messiah is going to come through the Eastern Gate of the temple, and that whole situation is going to happen where he touches down. well, the Muslims decide to try to stop the Messiah from coming, so they build a graveyard outside of the eastern gate, and they seal up the gate. And I don't care how tightly you seal that gate, when Yeshua is coming through that gate is going to open. It is going to open before him. But the psalmist, when he's talking about these ancient gates, doesn't matter how sealed they are, how shut they are, he's telling them that they are to open up for the King of Glory to come in. He's speaking to them. He's courageously confronting these gates to open up for the King of Glory. What's another open door that's mentioned in the Bible? That's the door to the ark for Noah. Think of it. In Hebrews 11:7 says, by faith Noah, being warned of God of things not seen as yet, moved with fear, prepared an ark for the saving of his house, by the which he condemned the world and became an heir of the righteousness which is by faith. His entire family entered the ark. They believed God's warning, they believed God's word, and then God shut the door to the ark once they were inside. So that door that was opened and then shut, it was shut as a protection to those who were inside. What's another one door that was open, door that was shut for them to be protected? Passover. Think of it. You'll paint the blood upon the doorposts of your house as a sign, and then the angels of death is going to pass over that home, but you have to stay inside that place. That's the safe place. That's the place of your protection. So there's some places where the door is a protection between you and whatever's trying to come against you. There was an open door to Israel at the Red Sea, and that was a door that they never expected to be open. You know, they're hemmed in by the sea, by the mountains. Pharaoh's army is closing in on them. Oh no, what are we going to do? But in Hebrews 11:29, by faith they passed through the Red Sea as by dry land, and the Egyptians tried to do it and were drowned. So the door was not open for the Egyptians to pass through. The door was open for the people of Israel to pass through. God made a way for them. He opened the door. There was another door that was open to Israel at the Jordan River. Same type of thing. The Jordan River is at flood stage. They couldn't cross over. But when Joshua goes there, Joshua 3:16, the waters which came down from above stood and rose up upon a heap far from the city of Adam. And those that came down toward the sea of the plain failed and were cut off, and the people passed over right against Jericho. So that was a door that was opened for them, a door right through the sea. And he made a passage for them. But he's making an open door for this church in Revelation. Why? Why? Is it because they're such a dynamic church that has such a big ministry and outreach and all this? It's because they're faithful. For the faithful, the doors are opened. They're a church that Yahweh can use in a big way because they've committed all. They've given him everything they have. They might have little power, but like Yeshua said, even if you have faith as a grain of mustard seed, if you say to this mountain, be moved and cast into the sea, and do not doubt in your heart. See, it's the purity of the faith. It's the conviction of it. It's the purity of their trust, their faithfulness in Yahweh that causes these doors to be open before them that no man can shut. And he's telling this church at Philadelphia that they're responsible enough to be trusted with an open door. I remember one time during this congregation, I don't know who exactly was that spoke it over us, whether it was Mary Fran or something. Somebody spoke over this church that there were doors that were open wide before us. And why is it? Because we're so big? Because we have so many numbers? No, because we're faithful in the least. Those who are faithful in the least, he can trust with more. But not only that, doors are open portals. We're familiar with open portals here. Mom's taught a lot about that. They're a transition from one space and environment to another. So it's a transition place. How many doors do you go through every day? Like, do you ever stop and think of how many doors do you walk through? We do it without even thinking. But how many doors do you go through every day? Have you ever thought that every time you go through a doorway, you're leaving one space and entering another space? You're literally walking you might be walking from the kitchen into the living room. You might be walking from this room into that room, but you're leaving one space, one setup, into another setup, another space. 1 minute, you're not in the hallway, you're now in the kitchen. You're in the entire room looks different. Well, at least most people's homes, it looks different. Like your kitchen doesn't really look like your bedroom. It's not supposed to. It's a different room. There's supposed to be a difference between the rooms in your house so that you know what their purpose is. There's a purpose for every room that you enter, and what you might be doing in one room is different than what you might do in another room. You get what I mean? So Yahweh tells them, in the Old Covenant, when he's giving them the commandments, he tells them to take the word and write it where? Upon the doorposts of their house. It's a reminder that wherever you're going, whether you're coming in, whether you're going out, you're to be doing his will. You're to be serving him. You're to be committed to doing what he's called you to do, no matter whether you're coming in, whether you're going out, no matter what room or spiritual room you might be in at that time. The entire purpose of it is for his glory. He says in Deuteronomy 11, fix these words of mine in your hearts and in your minds, tie them as symbols on your hands, and bind them on your foreheads. Teach them to your children, talking about them when you sit at home and when you walk along the road, when you lie down and when you get up. Write them on the doorframes of your houses and on your gates, so that your days and the days of your children may be many, and the land that the Lord swore to give to your ancestors, as many as the days that the heavens are above the earth. So there's promises if you're guarding the gates, if you're guarding the doors in your life, there's promises that are attached to that it's going to be a blessing to you. That's where the tradition of the mezuzah comes from. You fix the mezuzah to the gate. If you recall, those of you who have been to Israel with us, when we go to the community, what are they called? Samaritan community that's in the Mount Ebal area, they actually entirely write out the Shema. They write out the commandments on the doorposts. So they don't just put a mezuzah on it. They physically will write it out. Karaite Jews do the same. They're taking it more literally. But it's either way, it's to see that the doors are considered our comings and our goings, our very lives. It's not just that's the entrance to your house, but it's to represent your life and where you're coming, where you're going. That he's guarding that. That as much as our hands and our heads represent our mind and our actions. When it says that whatever your hand finds to do, it's your actions. It's not just talking about your physical hands. Or when he talks about binding it upon your mind, you're not just to put it on here and then that's it. It's supposed to be affecting the way you think, the way you see. The word mezuzah is translated into English as doorframe or gatepost, and it's connected to the Hebrew word to move, because the door moves on its hinges, which are attached to the gatepost or the doorframe. The entire concept of a portal or a door is the idea of moving. You don't usually just go into a door and just stand there. People might ask you what you're doing if you do that. But it has a coming and a going and a transitioning from one place to another. We're coming up to a door in this year where we're transitioning from 2022 into 2023. We're going to be exiting 1 year on this calendar, and we're entering another year. We will be coming up into Passover. Passover is much like that on the Hebrew calendar, on God's calendar, where it's a transitioning place. And seasons are like that. We talk about transitionings and seasons. There's a door of fall that closes, and then there's a door of winter that opens, and you're in another time, and you need to dress appropriately for the time. Each place that you enter into, there's an appropriate way to conduct yourself in that space, in that dimension, in that room. There's an appropriate thing. There's certain things that you shouldn't do in one room that you should do in another room. Now, you get it? I'm not going to get into any more detail in that, but I think you all get my drift. But there are several times in the Bible where things are about to move from one reality into the next, from one stage of the story to a whole new chapter, and there's a doorway that's mentioned in the story. Just read through the Bible and see how many times it talks about a doorway. One of these was when we just talked about this recently with Abraham and Sarah. They're sitting in their tent. And so the entire history is going to change after this point. But Adonai appears to Abraham while he's sitting where? In the entrance of his tent. He's sitting in the doorway. It's a transitioning period in Abram's life. And suddenly these three men come and they tell him that you're going to be a father. I'm going to come back in a year and you're going to have a son. And this comes to pass 9 months later. There's Sarah. She has a child. But later in the book of Judges, you have another woman who's barren in the natural, who appeals to the high priest Eli while he's sitting in the doorway of the temple. That was a transitioning period in Hannah's life, where she's about to step out of this room of barrenness into this room of her life being fruitful and fulfilled. It's quite literally a complete transition in her life. And it was also a transition because Samuel's brought onto the scene, and he ushered an entire era of kings that came into place. So this entire change of seasons happens at the door, happens at the threshold. We already mentioned the doors in the Passover story, but as I said before, there's some doors that should be shut. Yeshua tells us to shut the door when we pray. We also see the prophets of old closing doors when praying for miracles. 2 Kings 4, they closed the door upon, she just read that when she was talking about the woman with Elisha, when her son died and he laid him down on the bed and he goes in there and he shut the door. It's like, I'm shutting out unbelief, I'm shutting out any distraction, and I need to focus on the assignment that's at hand. The door of Noah's Ark was shut by God himself. And Yeshua talks about a day in which the door is going to be shut for people who decide to be on the outside of the kingdom. But again, when you look back at our passage in Revelation, let's go back over there. Revelation chapter 3. Revelation chapter 3, verse 20 says, "Behold, I stand at the door and knock. If anyone hears and listens to and heeds my voice and opens the door, I will come into him and will eat with him, and he will eat with me." So many people look at that verse as being a witnessing verse, like, he's knocking at the door of the world. No, he's talking to the churches here. He's talking specifically to these churches in Revelation. And he's talking about opening the door of their heart to him. Why is it that the Church of Philadelphia has this open door set before them? Could it be because they've opened the door of their hearts to Yeshua so that he can come in and out? So when we look at the entirety of this, he gives them a lot of promises in this passage. Not only does he say, I'm setting before you a door wide open, which no one is able to shut. He says, I know that you have but little power, and you have kept my word and guarded my message, have not renounced or denied my name. He said, I will make those of the synagogue of Satan who say they are Jews and are not but lie, I will make them come and bow down before your feet. So this is the second time when he refers to the synagogue of Satan. But it's an interesting phrase because they're those who claim to be descendants of Abraham, but they're only his physical descendants because their attitude toward God is removed from him. Like they're not practicing what they claim that they are, that his descendants in faith. Yeshua continuously was confronting the Pharisees on that because they claimed to be Abraham's descendants, but he told them that they were of their father, the devil. He's not against Judaism. He was against their rejection that he was their Messiah. He was the Messiah of Israel. But because they're being attacked like that by these people, he's saying that he's going to not only protect them, but they're going to eventually come to realize that, hey, you're right and we're wrong. Much like this reminds me of Joseph with his brothers when they end up coming and bowing down before him. Verse 10, it says, because you have guarded and kept my word of endurance, I will keep you. So we know the Hebrew word shomer means to guard. It talks about being a shomer over the Torah, or shomer over the commandments, that you're to guard them, you're to keep them, you're to watch over them. And if you're guarding and you're keeping, you're watching over that, then he's going to guard you and keep you and watch over you. See, there's two sides to this equation. You do your part, he'll do his part. But he says he's going to keep you safe from the hour of trial that's coming on the whole world, the tribulation. So if you're faithful to keep his word, then you're going to be kept safe from the tribulation that's coming on this world. Just like Noah was faithful in his generation to keep the word of God that he knew, he was kept safe from the devastation of the flood that came upon the world. He was kept safe from that. And then he says this is interesting. I am coming quickly. Hold fast what you have. So hold on tightly to what you have so that no one may rob you of your crown. So if he has to say that, then there's someone out there that's trying to steal their crown. So what is this crown that he's talking about taking? This isn't talking about salvation here. The crown is not salvation. A lot of people misread it as that. But he's not saying, hold on to what you have so no one can steal your salvation from you. It's not talking about that. In 1 Corinthians chapter 3, let's turn over there real quick. 1 Corinthians chapter 3, and we'll start at verse 11. For no other foundation can anyone lay than that which is already laid, which is Yeshua the Messiah, the Anointed One. But if anyone builds upon the foundation, whether it be with gold, silver, precious stones, wood, hay, straw, the work of each one will become plainly and openly known, shown for what it is. For the day of the Messiah will disclose and declare it, because it will be revealed with fire. And the fire will test and critically appraise the character and worth of the work each person has done. If the work which any person has built on this foundation, any product of his efforts, whatever, survives, he will get his reward. But if any person's work is burned up, he will suffer the loss of it all, losing his reward, though he himself will be saved, but only as one who has passed through fire. So when it talks about the crown, notice in this it says whether you build with gold, silver, and precious stones. Well, what are most crowns made out of? Gold, silver, precious stones. That's what you see that crowns are made of. If you're building with gold, silver, precious stones, then that's going to be formed into a crown. What is the purpose of this crown? For you to wear on your head and parade around in heaven? No. There's a passage in Revelation where it talks about the saints coming and casting down their golden crowns before him. If you come to this point where you're saved so as through the skin of your teeth or so as through fire, where you haven't done any works that are pleasing in his sight. He says that to one of the churches that we talked about before, that I haven't found a single work of yours that's pleasing in my sight. In other words, it's all hay and straw and stubble. It's going to be burned up in the fire. Does it mean that they've lost their salvation? No. But it means that they're not going to have any reward. They're just going to get through by the skin of their teeth and be saved, but they're not going to have a crown to cast at his feet. And that's perhaps the most devastating thing, to come to the end of life and realize, I've done nothing of value. I've done nothing that's of eternal worth. And I've done nothing that's glorifying to him, so I have nothing to give him. For all that he's done for me, for all he's given me, I have nothing to give him in return. I have no honor to bring him. I have nothing. I made it to heaven, but what's the joy in that if you don't have something to return to him? So that's what this is talking about. Hold on to what you have so no one may deprive you of your crown. There's an enemy that's out there that's trying to steal the very works that you do, the very things that could be used as a glorifying to Yahweh in this world. There's an enemy that's trying to steal that from you. And he tells them that they have to hold on to it. Hold on to it. You know, if somebody comes up and tries to take your purse from your hands, you hold on to your purse. You don't just let it go. If it has value to you, you're going to fight for it. You're going to not let anybody steal it from you. Again, it comes back to that. Does it have enough value that you're willing to put the persistence in behind it? Are you going to hold on to the precious gifts, referring back to what we were talking about on Sabbath, the precious gifts, the blessings that he's given us? Are you going to hold on to what he's given you as a gift within you and not let anyone steal that from you? And again, it's all to bring glory to him. It's all to come back to his glory. But to those who do, you know, those who hold on to it, it says those who hold on to their crown, those who are not deprived of their crown, those who don't lose the opportunities that have been given to them, they get a reward. What's the reward that he gives them? He who overcomes is victorious. Well, what's he talking about? Nobody stole their crown from them. So they overcame the enemy. We overcome by the blood of the Lamb and the word of our testimony. He who overcomes, I will make him a pillar in the sanctuary of my God. Now think of a pillar. Pillar is usually, especially in those times, they're made of marble or something that was solid, that couldn't be easily knocked over. The four pillars on either side of an auditorium a lot of times support the structure of the building. So if you overcome the enemy, he's saying he's going to make you something that's supporting the entire structure. Remember, he talks about how we're all being built up into a temple of God. I think it actually says that in 1 Corinthians 3, where we were just reading, that we're being built up into a temple for his glory and his praise. Well, there's certain support beams that you can't take out of a building without it causing the entire building to collapse. So, you know, those things that you put as a support, you want to be able to trust that it can hold it up. It needs to be tested. It needs to be tried. It needs to be proven that it's strong enough to hold it up. Now, everybody has a part in it, but you might have a little pebble in the foundation that, okay, we pull you out of that place, and it's not going to affect the entire structure. So if you missed your part, okay, it's all right. It's not going to affect the entire structure. But if you're made a pillar in this structure, then you're trusted with a lot of weight. You're trusted with a lot of responsibility. So he's saying to this church that those who are overcoming, he's going to make them a pillar. He's never going to be put out of it. He's never going to go out of it. Not only is he going to make them a pillar, but he's going to write some special names on them. The name of my God, the name of the city of my God, the New Jerusalem, which descends from my God out of heaven, and my own new name. What a special thing to have written upon you. Like, not only are you a pillar, you're strong, you're holding up this structure, you're someone who can be counted on to be there to hold it up. But he's going to name you with his own name. He's going to literally indelibly write this upon you. Just like we're written indelibly upon the palms of his hands, he's going to indelibly write upon us his own name. So you come into a place where you never have to go out again. It says he shall never be put out of it or go out of it. Remember we were just talking about the city of Philadelphia, how they kept experiencing these aftershocks? So they kept having to leave the city and come back into the city and leave the city and come back into the city. He's promising them such a secure place, you're not going to have to leave this city again. You're not going to have to go out of here anymore. They're protected. When you labor for Yeshua, you reach a place where you don't ever have to go out again. It's a place of security. It's a place of permanence. It's a place of strength. So he's basically saying that he's going to change their names. When he says he writes on them his name, he's going to change their names. 3 names are written on the overcomer. It's interesting because the city of Philadelphia changed its name twice in history. Later on, it was renamed Flavia in honor of Vespasian, one of the Flavian emperors. So it had 3 names. So the people knew what it meant to have a different name. It's quite common in Hebrew culture to, when you've come through either somebody has had a major conversion, or they've been healed of a disease, or they've had something major happen in their life, they change their name to reflect their new identity. That I'm not that old person anymore. Abram was changed to Abraham. Sarai was changed to Sarah. Even Saul on the road to Damascus, now you're Paul. Simon, now you're Peter. He renames them to give them a new identity. This is what I call you. Doesn't matter what the world might call you. And it doesn't matter that you might have little power. It doesn't matter that you might be insignificant. But I call you this. I've called you by name. You're mine. That's what he says to us. But he says again in verse 13, he who has an ear, let him listen to and heed what the Spirit says to the churches. He's telling them to stop and listen and pay attention to what he's saying, because this is going to spell out your destiny. It's your choice whether you're going to position yourselves for the open doors. It's your choice whether you're going to be the one who's found faithful, the one who's faithful to him to the utmost. This church had a true love for Yeshua, and it showed. He was so pleased that he showed them his approval in this letter. And these letters went throughout the churches, so the churches knew what each other had been told. But Philadelphia was also known as the Little Athens. It was full of idolatry, just like many of the other cities that we've talked about. But despite the idolatry in the town, it remained faithful to Yeshua. It doesn't even talk about anybody in the church who's going to worship the idols. It doesn't say about anything. This is a church that had no compromise. Church was not compromising. Like the believers in Smyrna, the believers in Philadelphia had no warning to remain faithful, to keep from falling away. There was no reason to, because they were already being faithful, even in the face of opposition. And they had no reason to fear or worry, because they kept the command of God and they were protected. They were kept safe from whatever was coming upon the earth. So I think there's an encouraging message in this, finally. It's nice to have an encouraging word every now and then. That if we are faithful to him, he's always going to be faithful to keep his promise to us. There's many promises in this word, and I encourage you to go and look up all the promises that he gives to those who overcome, those who overcome by the blood of the Lamb and the word of their testimony, those who stand firm, those who remain steadfast to him, those who remain faithful to him. There are great promises that are attached to that. He has put doors before us that are wide open. It's our choice whether we're going to walk into them or if we're going to stay where we're at, if we're going to stagnate, or if we're going to continue to move forward. As for me, I choose to continue to move forward, and I think that goes for all of us. This church has been a faithful church. We've had a lot thrown at us. We've had a lot that we've walked through, but we're still here, and we're still holding on to the message. We're still staying faithful, and we will continue to, because that's what he's called us to do. Amen? So thank you for those of you who joined us tonight. Trust you've gotten something out of this message. We'll see you on Saturday at 11. Until then, you have a blessed week.